At just 23, Alina felt like her life was stuck in slow motion. She had dreams bigger than the small apartment she lived in, but everything around her felt small. Her job, her social circle, even her sense of excitement. Every morning she would wake up, look at herself in the mirror, and whisper, "Something has to change," but nothing ever did. She worked as an assistant at a marketing firm, doing all the small tasks nobody else wanted, printing papers, replying to emails, bringing coffee. She smiled through the stress, but deep inside, she was exhausted. And when her boyfriend of 3 years broke up with her out of nowhere, saying he needed space, something inside her broke too. That night, she didn't cry like she thought she would. She sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling strangely empty. Her phone buzzed, a message from her friend Zara. "Come with me to the charity gala tonight. You need a distraction." Alina hesitated. It was a high-end event, full of people in expensive suits and gowns, not really her kind of place. But then she caught her reflection in the mirror again, and for the first time, she thought, why not? She pulled out a simple black dress she hadn't worn in years. It wasn't fancy, but it made her feel confident. When she arrived at the gala, the soft music, the laughter, and the glow of the chandeliers made her feel like she had stepped into another world. Everyone looked like they belonged, except her. Zara quickly got caught up talking to a group of people she knew, leaving Alina alone near the buffet table. She picked up a glass of juice and tried to blend in. That's when she noticed him. He stood across the room, tall and composed, talking to a few people who seemed to hang on his every word. His suit fit perfectly, but it wasn't just his looks that caught her attention. There was something about his energy, calm but powerful. When he laughed softly at something someone said, Alina felt her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. A few minutes later, their eyes met. It was just a moment, but it felt longer than it should have. He smiled politely, and Alina quickly looked away, embarrassed. She didn't even know why her heart was racing. She tried to focus on anything else, the music, the people, the food, but her eyes kept wandering back to him. Then suddenly, he was standing beside her, not enjoying the event. His voice was smooth, gentle, yet confident. Alina froze for a second before smiling nervously. "It's nice, just not really my kind of place." He chuckled. "Same here. I came because a friend insisted. These things can be exhausting." She laughed lightly, feeling a bit more relaxed. "Exactly. Too many smiles, not enough real conversations." He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Then let's make this one real." They started talking about work, music, travel, random little things that didn't really matter but somehow connected them. Alina found herself laughing more than she had in months. He had a way of listening that made her feel seen, not just heard. As the night went on, she realized she didn't even know his name. She was about to ask when he said, "You have kind eyes, you know that." The comment caught her off guard. No one had said something so sincere to her in a long time. Her cheeks warmed, and she smiled shyly. "Thank you, you're not bad yourself." He laughed softly, a deep sound that somehow made her feel at ease. For the first time that night, she wasn't thinking about her breakup or her job or her loneliness. She was just there, in that moment, talking to someone who made her feel alive again. When the event started to wind down, he looked at her with a quiet expression. "Can I walk you out?" Outside, the air was cool and calm. The city lights reflected off the shiny cars parked in a line. They stood there for a few seconds, both unsure what to say. Then he said gently, "You know, sometimes the best things in life happen when we stop planning them." Alina smiled faintly. "Maybe you're right." They exchanged a few more words, soft and genuine, until finally, she said she should head home. He didn't ask for her number, and she didn't ask for his name. It was strange. It felt like they both understood that the night was meant to stay just like this, simple, special, and mysterious. As her cab pulled away, Alina looked out the window and saw him watching her leave. For a reason she couldn't explain, her heart ached a little. It wasn't sadness, it was something different, something unfamiliar. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed their conversation in her head over and over. She didn't know who he was, and she didn't expect to ever see him again. But there was something in his eyes that made her feel that their story wasn't over yet. And deep down, a quiet voice inside her whispered, "This night will change everything." Asterisk for days after that night, Alina couldn't stop thinking about him. She didn't even know his name, yet his voice kept echoing in her mind. The way he looked at her, the calm in his tone, the warmth in his smile, it all lingered. She didn't tell anyone about it, not even Zara. It felt too personal, too special to be reduced to casual gossip. Every morning on her way to work, she would catch herself wondering who he really was. Maybe a businessman, maybe someone from another city. She tried to convince herself it didn't matter. It was just one night, one conversation. But deep down, something about that encounter felt different, like it wasn't meant to end there. Work, however, didn't give her much time to daydream. The marketing firm she worked at had just landed a major client, a high-profile company that everyone was talking about. The office was buzzing with new projects, and Alina was trying hard to keep up. Her boss, a tough but fair woman named Ruxana, was in full perfection mode, making everyone double-check every detail. One morning, as Alina was organizing some reports, Ruxana called out, "We have an important meeting today with the new investors. Be ready to assist the team and make sure everything runs smoothly." Alina nodded quickly, adjusting her blazer. She had no idea this day would change everything. By noon, the conference room was glowing with energy. Executives in suits were setting up presentations, and the air smelled of expensive coffee and nerves. Alina moved quietly, arranging files and setting up water bottles on the table. She didn't pay much attention to who was walking in and out, until she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Is this seat taken?" Her hands froze. That voice, that same calm, steady voice from the gala night. Slowly, she turned around. It was him. For a second, her brain refused to process what she was seeing. The same man, the stranger from the gala, now stood in front of her, wearing an elegant gray suit and a quiet smile. Only this time, he wasn't just another guest. Before she could speak, Ruxana rushed forward. "Sir, welcome. It's an honor to have you here, sir." Alina blinked. Her heart was pounding. Everyone seemed to know who he was, except her. The man nodded politely. "Thank you, Ms. Ruxana. Please, call me Arhan. Arhan." So that was his name. As he took his seat at the head of the table, the room fell into a professional silence. Alina stepped back, clutching her notepad, trying to stay invisible. But inside, her thoughts were racing. He's the investor, the same man from that night. It felt surreal. The quiet stranger who had once walked her out of a gala was now the man everyone looked up to. She didn't know whether to laugh or panic. Throughout the meeting, Arhan spoke with authority but without arrogance. His voice was calm, his ideas sharp. Even the senior managers listened with complete focus. Alina couldn't take her eyes off him. Every now and then, she caught him glancing her way, just quick, subtle looks that made her heartbeat quicken. After the meeting ended, she stayed back to clean up the room, hoping to calm her nerves. But before she could leave, she heard footsteps behind her. "You're still here," his voice said softly. She turned. He was standing near the doorway, his tie slightly loosened, his expression thoughtful. "I didn't know you worked here," he said after a pause. She smiled nervously. "I didn't know you owned the company." He chuckled quietly. "Technically, I'm just one of the investors, but it seems fate has a sense of humor." Alina didn't know what to say. The last time they met, they were two strangers sharing an honest conversation. Now, there were walls between them, hierarchy, professionalism, unspoken rules. Still, something about the moment felt oddly comforting. "I thought I'd never see you again," she admitted softly. Arhan's eyes softened. "Neither did I." For a few seconds, silence hung between them. The kind of silence that said everything words couldn't. Finally, he said, "You handled yourself well today. You seemed dedicated." "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady, but her heart still racing. He smiled slightly. "I hope this won't make things awkward between us. The last thing I'd want is for you to feel uncomfortable." She shook her head quickly. "No, not at all. It's just unexpected." He nodded. "Life often is." Before leaving, he glanced at her again and said quietly, "Keep doing what you're doing. Alina, you're better than you think." That one sentence stayed with her the entire day. Back at her desk, she tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept replaying every word, every look. Part of her felt proud that someone like him had noticed her work, her effort, but another part of her was scared. What if people found out about that night? What if it caused trouble? She decided to keep it a secret. No one needed to know what had happened between them before. It was just a moment in time, a beautiful, impulsive memory that should stay buried. But destiny had other plans. The next few days, Arhan visited the office more often for meetings and reviews. He remained professional, but every time he passed by Alina's desk, he gave her a polite nod or a quick smile, small gestures that meant more than words. And even though they never talked about that night again, the unspoken connection between them grew stronger with every glance. Neither of them said it aloud, but both knew something deeper was unfolding, something neither could control or predict. And while Alina tried to convince herself that she was just another employee, her heart whispered something different every time he looked her way. This wasn't coincidence anymore. It was the quiet beginning of something life-changing. Days turned into weeks, and Alina's life slowly began to feel like it was split into two worlds. One was the ordinary, her desk, her computer, her endless to-do list. The other was the strange, silent connection she shared with Arhan, her company's new investor, and the same man who had once been a complete stranger on a starry night. Even though they rarely spoke now, his presence was impossible to ignore. Whenever he walked into the office, conversations softened, people straightened their backs, and the air seemed to shift. He had that quiet authority that didn't need to be announced. And yet, whenever his eyes found hers, even for a second, Alina felt her heart skip a beat. She tried her best to act normal. She focused on her work, smiled when needed, and kept her thoughts to herself. But inside, she was in constant conflict. Every time she saw him, the memories of that night flashed in her mind. His smile, his voice, his warmth. One morning, Alina arrived early to finish a presentation. The office was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. She liked that time of day, no noise, no rush, just peace. She was scrolling through slides when a voice broke the silence. "You start your day early," Arhan said, walking in with a cup of coffee in his hand. Alina quickly stood up, her heart racing. "Oh, good morning, sir. I was just finishing the report." He smiled lightly. "You don't have to call me sir, you know." "Arhan is fine." She hesitated. "It doesn't feel right to call you by name at work." He chuckled softly. "Fair enough." Then, after a small pause, he asked, "How are you settling in?" "I'm learning," she replied. Trying to keep up, his eyes softened. "You're doing more than just keeping up, Alina. I've seen your reports. You're good at what you do." The words caught her off guard. Compliments weren't something she received often, especially not from people like him. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "You remind me of how I started. Quiet, focused, always overthinking. That's how I know you'll go far." Before she could respond, someone from the senior team entered. And just like that, the brief, honest moment between them was gone. But it stayed with her long after he left. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more often, sometimes in meetings, sometimes by accident in the hallway, sometimes during late evenings when both stayed behind to finish work. Their conversations were short but meaningful, never too personal, but always warm enough to leave a trace. One evening, it started raining heavily just as everyone was leaving the office. Alina stood near the glass door, watching the downpour, realizing she had forgotten her umbrella. She sighed softly, ready to make a run for it. "Leaving now?" a familiar voice asked behind her. She turned to see Arhan holding his umbrella. "I can drop you," he said casually. "It's late, and this rain won't stop anytime soon." For a second, she wanted to refuse, to keep things strictly professional. But the wind outside was strong, and the rain was pouring hard. She finally nodded. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." Inside the car, the silence was strange but comforting. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the space. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself. "Miss what?" he asked, glancing at her. "Being normal. Living without all the pressure of being someone important." He smiled faintly, eyes still on the road. "Every day." People think success makes life easier. It doesn't, it just gives you better problems. She laughed softly. That's one way to put it. He looked at her for a brief second, then said quietly, "You're different, Alina. Most people try to impress. You just show up as yourself." Her heart warmed at his words. "Maybe because I don't know how to be anyone else." He smiled. "That's rare." The car stopped in front of her apartment. She thanked him, but before stepping out, he said, "Be careful out there, and don't lose that honesty of yours. It'll take you places." That night, she couldn't sleep. His words kept replaying in her head, not because they were romantic, but because they felt genuine. He saw something in her that she didn't even see in herself. The next day at work, things felt different. People were talking about upcoming restructuring, new roles, promotions, changes. Alina didn't pay much attention until Ruxana called her into her office. "You've been assigned to the CEO's direct project team," she said. Alina's eyes widened. "What? Why me?" Ruxana smiled. "Because someone noticed your potential. Don't waste this opportunity." Alina walked out, still in shock. Her heart was racing, not just because of the opportunity, but because she knew exactly who had noticed her. Working directly under Arhan's supervision meant more time, more interactions, and more challenges. But it also meant walking on a very thin line between admiration and professionalism, between memory and reality. When Arhan called her in to discuss the project, he didn't mention the past or the promotion. He was all business, calm and precise. Yet every now and then, his eyes softened when he looked at her, just for a second, as if remembering the same night she couldn't forget. For Alina, this was a new beginning, one she hadn't planned, one she wasn't sure she was ready for. But deep inside, she knew this chapter of her life was about to test her in ways she never imagined, not just as an employee, but as a woman learning what it means to trust, to grow, and maybe to feel again. And somewhere in that quiet office, between reports and late nights, two hearts were slowly beginning to write a story neither of them had expected to live. The days that followed felt like walking on a delicate thread for Alina. She had officially joined the CEO's direct project team, a position people in her office would have fought for. Everyone congratulated her, some genuinely, others with envy masked as smiles. But behind her polite thank yous and calm expression, she carried a storm inside her. Every morning when she entered the executive floor, she told herself the same thing: stay focused, stay professional. But the moment she stepped into Arhan's office, that quiet mantra started to fade. He always greeted her with a simple good morning, a soft smile, and eyes that said more than words ever could. Their meetings were about data, reports, and marketing strategies, yet somehow, every conversation felt personal. There was a rhythm between them that no one else seemed to notice. But things changed one Friday afternoon. The team was preparing for a major presentation for international clients. The pressure was intense, and so was the energy in the room. Arhan sat at the head of the long table, calm as always, while Alina presented the campaign layout on the big screen. As she spoke, she could feel his gaze on her, not distracting, but observant, as if he was studying more than just her words. When the meeting ended, and the others left, he stayed behind. "That was impressive, Alina," he said, closing his notebook. "You handled the clients better than some of our senior staff." She smiled shyly. "Thank you. I just tried to do my best." He nodded, leaning back in his chair. "You don't just try. You deliver." There was a pause, long enough to feel the air shift. Then, softly, he added, "Do you remember the night we met?" Her heart froze. She had spent weeks pretending that night never happened, convincing herself that it was better left behind. Hearing him mention it now made her pulse race. "I remember," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. His expression softened. "I wasn't supposed to be there that night. My friend dragged me out to that gala after a long day at work. I wasn't in the mood for people. And then," he hesitated, smiling faintly, "I met you." She looked down, trying to hide the warmth spreading across her cheeks. "It was just one night, was it?" he asked gently. Alina didn't know how to answer. She could feel her heartbeat echoing in the quiet room. He continued, "I tried to forget it too. But when I saw you here, that first day, it felt like déjà vu. Like life was giving me a second look at something I didn't even know I was searching for. Her throat went dry. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "You're my boss." Arhan sighed softly, resting his hands on the desk. "You're right. I just wanted you to know the truth. Whatever happens next, you deserve honesty." The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but real. The kind that happens when two people are caught between what's right and what feels right. Before either of them could say more, there was a knock on the door. One of the senior managers stepped in with a file, breaking the moment. Arhan straightened instantly, his tone shifting back to business. "We'll discuss this later, Alina," he said calmly. She nodded and left, her mind spinning. That night, Alina couldn't sleep. She replayed every word, every look. What did he mean? A second look at something I didn't know I was searching for. She told herself it was just a harmless confession, nothing more. But deep inside, she knew something had changed. By Monday morning, the office air was thick with rumors. People whispered about promotions, new deals, and projects. But soon, the whispers turned into something else. Someone had seen Arhan and Alina leaving the office building late one night after working overtime. It didn't take long for the gossip to spread. At first, Alina ignored it. She focused on her work, determined not to give anyone a reason to doubt her. But she could feel the shift, the glances, the hushed tones when she entered the room, the sudden silence in the elevator. Even Ruxana, who had always been supportive, seemed distant now. One afternoon, while Alina was preparing documents, she overheard two co-workers whispering near the coffee machine, "She's close to the CEO now." One said, smirking, "No wonder she got promoted so fast." Alina's stomach dropped. She quietly walked away before they noticed her. But the damage was done. That evening, Arhan called her into his office. His expression was serious. "I heard what's being said," he began. She looked at him helplessly. "I swear, I didn't." "I know," he interrupted softly. "You don't need to explain. But people will talk. It's what they do." Tears stung her eyes, though she tried to hide them. "This could ruin everything I've worked for." He stood up, his tone calm but firm. "I won't let that happen. You've earned your place here. But if they think, I don't care what they think," he said, his voice steady now. "What matters is the truth. You've done nothing wrong." His words gave her strength, but they also made her realize something deeper, that he wasn't just protecting her as an employee. He cared more than he wanted to admit. As she walked out that evening, the office lights reflecting in the glass windows, she knew things would never go back to how they were. Something had shifted, not just in how people saw her, but in how she saw him. The stranger she had once met by chance was no longer just a memory or a mystery. He was now part of her everyday reality, one that was beautiful, complicated, and dangerously close to crossing lines neither of them had planned to approach. And for the first time, Alina understood what real recognition felt like, not of a face, but of a connection that refuses to fade, no matter how much you try to hide it. The days after the rumors began were the hardest Alina had ever faced. It wasn't just about whispers anymore. It was the way people looked at her, the quiet stares in the elevator, the sudden hush when she entered the break room, the sarcastic smiles that said, "We know what you did." At first, she tried to ignore it. She kept her head down, did her work, and pretended she didn't care. But pretending only worked until she went home, until the silence of her apartment reminded her how alone she was in all of it. She used to love her job. It gave her purpose, pride, a reason to get up every morning. But now, every email, every meeting felt heavy. Every time she saw Arhan, she didn't know whether to feel comforted or guilty. He noticed it too. One evening, after everyone had left, he found her still sitting at her desk, staring blankly at her laptop screen. "Still here?" he asked softly. She looked up, startled. "Just finishing something." He walked closer, stopping beside her desk. "You've been finishing something every night this week," he said gently. "You don't need to prove yourself to anyone." She sighed, closing her laptop. "I'm not proving anything. I'm just trying to breathe." There was silence between them for a moment, the kind that carried everything neither dared to say. "I know what they're saying," he finally said, his tone calm but low. "But you can't let it define you. "It's easy for you to say," she whispered. "They don't talk about you the same way. For them, you're still the powerful CEO. But for me," she paused, swallowing hard, "I'm just the girl who got lucky, or worse, the girl who climbed her way up through someone else." Arhan looked at her, his expression heavy. "That's not who you are, and anyone who's worked with you knows that. But does it matter?" she asked quietly. "Reputation sticks. People believe what they want." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "If you want, I can request HR to move you to a different department, away from my direct supervision. It might help ease things." Her heart ached at the thought. The idea of not seeing him every day, of losing that unspoken connection they shared, felt like a quiet heartbreak. But maybe it was the right thing to do. "I'll think about it," she said softly. He nodded, understanding more than she said. "Whatever you decide, just know I'm proud of you, Alina. You've earned everything you have." When he left, she sat there for a long time, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was about what her heart wanted and what her mind warned her against. The next few days were quieter. She avoided long conversations with him, choosing instead to send quick updates through emails or short meetings with other team members. Present. She thought distance would make things easier, but it did in single quotes every time she heard his voice down the hallway. Something inside her stirred. Every time she saw his name pop up in her inbox, her heart fluttered before her mind reminded her, "Stop it. He's your boss." But the heart doesn't follow office rules. One evening, after a particularly long day, she found herself alone in the conference room finishing a presentation. The lights were dim, the city glowed outside the tall windows, and the only sound was the soft hum of her laptop. "Still here?" came the familiar voice again. She looked up to see Arhan at the door, his jacket draped over his arm, his expression tired but kind. "I could ask you the same thing," she replied, smiling faintly. He chuckled softly. "Fair enough." He walked in, standing beside her as she worked. "You know, you've done remarkable work on this campaign," he said. "I mean it." "Thank you," she replied quietly. He hesitated, then said, "You're thinking about leaving, aren't you?" She froze. "Who told you that?" "No one," he said softly. "But I can see it in your eyes. You're carrying more than you should." Her voice trembled slightly. "Maybe that's for the best. Maybe stepping away will make things easier. For both of us." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "You know what I've learned?" he said quietly. "People will always talk. They'll build stories around what they don't understand. But if we start living to silence them, we'll lose ourselves." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he admitted. "But it's honest." Their eyes met, and for a brief second, the world outside disappeared. There was no office, no gossip, no rules, just two people who understood each other too deeply for words. Then reality returned, as it always did. Alina stood up, gathering her files. "I should go," she said, her voice quiet. He nodded. "Of course. Get some rest." But as she reached the door, he spoke again. "Alina." She turned. "Whatever you decide, stay or leave. Just know one thing," he said softly. "You didn't find your place here because of me. You earned it. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Her throat tightened, and she nodded silently before walking out. That night, as she rode home through the glowing streets, she stared out the window, lost in thought. Her mind was chaos, but her heart whispered one truth she couldn't escape. She cared for him, more than she should. And that was her biggest conflict, not the rumors, not the stares, not even the risk to her career. It was the quiet, undeniable feeling that somewhere between professionalism and fate, she had fallen for the man she was supposed to only respect, a feeling that could either break her or teach her what love really meant. It was a Thursday morning when everything came undone. The office was buzzing as usual, people typing, phones ringing, laughter echoing faintly through the halls. Alina had just settled at her desk when her friend Zara from HR quietly walked over. Her face looked pale. "Alina," she said in a low voice. "You need to know something." Alina frowned. "What happened?" Zara hesitated before handing her a tablet. "Someone leaked photos from the company event last weekend." Alina scrolled through the screen. and her stomach dropped. There, in crystal clarity, was a photo of her and Arhan, standing near the exit of the banquet hall. They weren't holding hands. They weren't doing anything wrong, but the way they looked at each other said everything. It wasn't just a professional exchange. It was personal. Her fingers trembled. Where did this come from? No one knows, Zara whispered. But people are already talking. It's spreading through the internal chat groups. Some even emailed HR. Alina felt the world spin around her. Her heart raced, her breathing grew shallow. Oh God, she whispered. By noon, it wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was an open discussion, whispered in corridors, laughed about in break rooms, and forwarded in messages under fake sympathy. She could feel it, every look, every smirk, every whispered word that stopped the moment she walked by. Her name had turned into a story, one she never wrote. When Arhan found out, he called her to his office immediately. The moment she stepped in, she could see the tension in his eyes. He was calm on the outside, but his jaw was tight, and his hands were clenched. I saw the pictures, he said quietly. HR has been informed. They're investigating where they came from. Alina tried to speak, but her voice cracked. This is going to ruin everything, isn't it? He shook his head. Not if I can help it. But what about you? The board, the investors, I'll handle it, he said firmly. You don't need to take the blame for something that isn't your fault. Tears welled up in her eyes. But it is my fault. I should have been more careful. I should have. Stop, he interrupted softly. You didn't do anything wrong. We met before this job. We didn't plan this. His voice was steady, but his eyes gave away the truth. He was just as scared. Over the next few hours, chaos took over the office. HR called in both of them for questioning. They asked cold, calculated questions about meetings, messages, timelines, trying to find proof of misconduct. Alina answered everything honestly, her hands shaking as she signed the papers. But deep inside, she felt hollow. By the end of the day, she was asked to take temporary leave until the matter was reviewed. It was a polite way of saying, stay away until the fire dies down. When she packed her things, no one said a word. Some avoided her eyes. Others looked at her with pity. The walls that once echoed with her laughter now felt cold and distant. As she walked toward the elevator, Arhan appeared from the other side of the hall. Their eyes met, just for a moment. He couldn't say anything, not in front of everyone. But his expression said it all. I'm sorry. I'll fix this. Outside, the city felt louder than ever. Cars honked, people rushed by, but for Alina, the world had gone quiet. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at her packed work bag. Everything she'd built, every effort, every late night, every sacrifice, felt like it had crumbled because of one misunderstood connection. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. You thought no one would find out. Enjoy the fame. Her heart stopped. Whoever had leaked those photos wasn't just gossiping. They wanted to hurt her. Before she could process it, another message came. People like you don't belong where you tried to go. Alina put down her phone, tears spilling down her face. She had never felt smaller, more exposed, or more misunderstood. Hours later, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, Arhan stood there, still in his suit, looking tired but determined. I shouldn't have come, he said softly, but I needed to see if you were okay. She didn't answer. She just looked at him, eyes red, voice trembling. Why is this happening? We didn't do anything wrong. I know, he said, stepping closer. But sometimes the world doesn't care about truth. It only cares about headlines. He sat down across from her, his voice low. I told the board I'm stepping down temporarily until this clears. I won't let them use this against you. Her head snapped up. You can't do that. This is your company. It's just a title, he said quietly. But your name, that's your life. I won't let them destroy that. She stared at him, her heart breaking and healing all at once. He was risking everything, not for guilt, but for her. Why would you do that? She whispered. He met her eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I care, Alina, more than I should. Silence filled the room, heavy, real, and honest. In that moment, she realized something. The world could twist stories, spread lies, and judge what it didn't understand. but there were still people who chose integrity over image, who cared without conditions. When he finally left that night, she watched him disappear into the rain. Her heart was bruised, but it still beat with something new, strength. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the start of finding out who she really was and who stood beside her. When the world turned away, *A week passed since the scandal broke, but to Alina, it felt like a lifetime. The days blurred together, long hours of silence, restless nights, and unanswered questions that kept circling in her mind. She avoided social media, ignored calls from co-workers, and spent most of her time sitting by her window, watching the city move on without her. The company had announced Arhan's temporary leave for personal reasons. The news spread like wildfire, and soon the spotlight shifted away from her. Yet the damage lingered. Her confidence had cracked. She couldn't look at her reflection without feeling that mix of shame and anger. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she had let people make her feel like she had. One rainy evening, she received a short message from Arhan. "Board cleared you of all allegations. You're free to return whenever you're ready." She stared at those words for a long time. Free. But freedom didn't feel like it used to. The next morning, she dressed simply, no makeup, no pretense, and went back to the office. Walking through those glass doors again felt surreal. Every sound echoed louder, the hum of computers, the faint buzz of conversation. A few people greeted her nervously. Others avoided eye contact. She didn't blame them. People are brave in gossip, but quiet in truth. When she reached her desk, she noticed something on top, a white envelope with her name in Arhan's handwriting. Her chest tightened as she opened it. Inside was a single note. "I'm leaving for a while, maybe permanently. You deserve peace, not a shadow of controversy. Thank you for reminding me what honesty feels like." Her hands trembled. She read it again and again until the words blurred. He was gone, just like that. For a moment, she wanted to cry. But instead, she smiled faintly, because somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't goodbye in pain. It was closure in truth. Weeks passed. The office slowly went back to normal, though nothing felt quite the same. Arhan's absence left a quiet gap, not just in the company, but in her life. She missed his calm voice, his steady encouragement, the way he made her believe she could do more than she thought. But she also began to find herself again. She threw her energy into work, not as a distraction, but as a way of rebuilding what she had almost lost, her self-worth. Instead of hiding, she started speaking up in meetings. Instead of doubting, she started trusting her instincts. And slowly, people began to see her differently, not as the girl from the rumor, but as the woman who survived it. One evening, months later, the company organized a leadership seminar at a hotel downtown. Alina was invited to present a campaign she had led successfully, one that had revived the firm's reputation after the scandal. As she stood on stage, facing a crowd of professionals and new interns, she felt her nerves vanish. She spoke about failure, courage, and integrity, not as lessons from a book, but from life. She didn't mention names, but her words carried weight. "Sometimes life breaks you in public," she said, her voice steady. "But the same people who whisper when you fall will watch in silence when you rise. So rise anyway." The audience applauded, genuine, heartfelt. For the first time, Alina didn't feel small. She felt seen for who she truly was. After the event ended, as she walked out into the hotel garden, she saw a familiar silhouette standing near the fountain. For a second, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. But when the man turned around, her breath caught. It was Arhan. He looked different, simpler, calmer, wearing no suit this time. Just a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, the same quiet strength in his eyes. "I didn't think I'd see you here," she said softly, her voice barely above the sound of the water. "I almost didn't come," he replied, smiling faintly. "But I heard about your project and your speech." She laughed lightly. "I'm surprised anyone still talks about my speeches. They do when they come from the heart." He said. There was a pause, long, familiar, comfortable. "I should thank you," she said after a moment. "You took all the blame when you didn't have to." He shook his head. "I didn't do it for blame or credit. I did it because it was right. You taught me that." Alina looked at him, realizing something she hadn't before. All along, she had been searching for validation, for someone to see her worth. But the truth was, she had found it within herself. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Start over," he said simply. "Different place, smaller company. Maybe build something new, something honest." She smiled. "You always liked a challenge, and you," he said, looking at her with warmth. "You were always stronger than you believed." They stood there for a while, letting the silence say everything words couldn't. There was no grand confession, no dramatic ending, just quiet understanding, mutual respect, and something pure that didn't need a name. Before leaving, he said, "You'll do great things, Alina. You already are." And with that, he walked away into the evening, his figure fading into the golden light. Alina stood there, feeling the gentle breeze brush against her face. She didn't feel sadness this time. She felt gratitude. For him, for the lessons, for the pain that shaped her into who she had become. That night, as she looked out from her apartment window, she whispered to herself, "Some stories aren't meant to end with forever. Some end with freedom. Because sometimes, the real happy ending isn't finding someone else. It's finding yourself."